Have you ever noticed that one person in your life who knows everything about everyone, who watches every story, likes every post, sees every update, but never, not once, puts themselves out there? No profile picture, no selfies, no "look what I did today," nothing. And you've always wondered what is actually going on in that person's head, because it can't just be shyness. It can't just be that they don't care. There has to be something deeper happening beneath that silence. And the truth is, there absolutely is. And once I explain it to you today, you're either going to recognize someone you know instantly, or you're going to look in the mirror and finally understand yourself. So let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand is that humans are wired, literally neurologically wired, to seek social connection. And for most of human history, that connection happened face to face. In tribes, in villages, where being seen by others meant you were safe, you belonged, you mattered. But then something changed, because suddenly the entire world became the audience, and not everyone's brain responded to that shift the same way. And for a very specific type of person, the idea of putting yourself in front of thousands, sometimes millions of strangers, didn't feel like connection at all. It felt like exposure. It felt like danger. And their nervous system started treating a simple Instagram post the same way your ancient ancestors treated walking into a field full of predators: fight, flight, or freeze. And most of these people chose freeze. They chose invisibility. And here's where it gets psychologically fascinating, because choosing to be invisible is not passive. It is one of the most active psychological decisions a human being can make. Psychologists have studied this extensively, and what they found is that people who avoid self-presentation online almost always fall into one of several very distinct psychological profiles, and the first one is what researchers call the observer personality. These are people who process the world primarily by watching rather than participating. They are the ones who walk into a room and immediately scan every face, every dynamic, every subtle social interaction happening. They are gathering information constantly. They are students of human behavior, whether they know it or not. And the internet to them is the greatest observatory ever built. They can watch the entire theater of human life without ever stepping onto the stage. And this isn't fear for them. This is actually their comfort zone. This is where they feel most powerful, most in control, most themselves, because the moment they step onto that stage, they lose the one thing they value most: their perspective. Because you cannot observe clearly when you are the one being observed. The second psychological profile is far more emotionally complex, and this is the person who desperately wants to post, who drafts captions and then deletes them, who takes 20 photos and keeps none of them, who starts a video and stops it halfway through. And what's happening in that person's brain is a brutal collision between two deeply human needs: the need to be seen and the need to be safe. Because at some point in their life, usually in childhood or adolescence, being seen was not safe. Maybe they were ridiculed, maybe they were ignored when they did speak up. Maybe they were raised in an environment where drawing attention to yourself was considered arrogant or dangerous. And the brain remembered that. The brain filed it under threat. And now every time they try to post something, that old wound fires up and says, "Don't do it, you'll be judged, you'll be laughed at, you'll be rejected." And so they retreat back into silence. Not because they don't have anything to say, but because somewhere deep down, they don't yet believe their voice deserves to take up space. And that is one of the saddest and most common psychological realities of our generation. Then there's a third type that almost nobody talks about, and this one is genuinely fascinating from a psychological standpoint. The person who doesn't post because they are deeply, almost philosophically opposed to the performance of it all. These are people with extremely high self-awareness who look at social media and see it for exactly what it is: a curated theater of highlight reels, carefully constructed identities, and social validation loops, and they want no part of it. Not because they're antisocial, not because they're afraid, but because they see through the mechanism and they refuse to participate in it. Refuse to reduce their actual complex inner life to a 12-second reel or a perfectly filtered photo. And psychologically, This type of person often scores very high in what's called openness to experience, combined with a very strong internal locus of control, meaning they don't need external validation to feel good about themselves. Their sense of self is built from the inside out, not the outside in. And that is genuinely rare. That is a psychological profile that most people are actually striving toward without realizing it. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because there's something called the spotlight effect, a well-documented psychological phenomenon where people massively overestimate how much others are noticing them, how much others are judging them, how much anyone is actually paying attention to what they do. The research shows that when you walk into a room thinking everyone noticed your stain or your bad hair day, almost nobody did, because everyone else is too busy worrying about their own stain, their own bad hair day, their own invisible audience watching and judging them. And people who don't post on social media are often experiencing a kind of amplified spotlight effect where the imagined audience in their head is enormous and terrifying. Every potential post is prejudged and pre-rejected by a jury that doesn't actually exist, and they live in constant rehearsal of a performance they never give. And once you understand that, you understand that the silence isn't laziness, or arrogance, or being above it all. It is often a person fighting a very real and very exhausting internal battle. But let's also talk about the power dynamic, because this is something that gets completely overlooked. In any social space, the person who shares least holds the most information advantage. They know everything about you, and you know nothing about them. And while this can be unconscious for most quiet observers, for some people, it is a completely deliberate psychological strategy. They have understood, whether intuitively or consciously, that information is power, that mystery creates intrigue, that the less you reveal, the more curious people become about you. And this connects directly to a concept in social psychology called scarcity principle, which says that people value what is rare and hard to obtain, and a person whose inner life is completely private becomes psychologically magnetic to those around them. Think about the most interesting people you've ever met, and I can almost guarantee at least one of them was someone who said very little, but when they did speak, everyone leaned in. That is not an accident. That is a psychological reality playing out in real time. And then there is the layer that nobody wants to admit, but everyone needs to hear. Some people don't post because the version of themselves they would have to present online does not match who they actually are, and they are not yet ready to confront that gap. The person who would post would have to decide, who am I? What do I stand for? What does my life look like to the outside world? And for someone going through an identity crisis, a period of reinvention, a quiet personal breakdown, or even just a season of deep self-doubt, the act of posting feels like lying. It feels like presenting a life they don't fully believe in yet. And so silence becomes a form of integrity, a refusal to perform a self they haven't fully built yet. And there is something quietly brave about that, even if it doesn't feel brave from the inside. So the next time you see that person who watches everything and shows nothing, understand that their silence is not emptiness. It is a whole universe happening behind a closed door. It might be fear, it might be wisdom, it might be self-protection, it might be a philosophical refusal, it might be a wound still healing, it might be a strategy so precise it would make you rethink everything you post. But what it is never, ever, is nothing. Because the quietest people in the room are almost always the ones with the loudest inner world, and psychology has proven that over and over again. And if this video made you stop and think about someone in your life, or made you think about yourself in a way you haven't before, then you already understand why this topic matters, because understanding why people go silent in a world that rewards volume is one of the most important things you can do, both for your empathy toward others and your own self-awareness. And that is exactly what this channel is here for. So subscribe, because next time we're going somewhere even darker.